Some say horror stories are just make-believe. But what if I told you that a few people who listen to stories like these were never quite the same again? You've been warned. There's a belief out there that listening to horror tales before bed invites something dark into your night. And yet, it's always those people who end up listening right to the end. Why? Because deep down they know something is already watching. Tonight, you won't sleep the way you usually do. The story you're about to hear might disturb your peace, or awaken something that's been waiting for you. Don't skip. Don't pause. Don't click away. Because the further you go, the more the pieces begin to make sense. And by the end, you might finally understand why some sounds at night aren't just the wind. But before you drift off and forget, tap that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know, and it keeps these unsettling stories coming. Oh, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? It really matters, because the more I know about you, the closer the next story will get. The rain has been falling for 3 days now, gentle at first, then steadily growing heavier until it became a constant symphony against the roof and windows of my small cottage. I've always loved the rain, found it soothing, comforting even. There's something about being tucked away inside, while the world outside is washed clean, that brings me peace. Or at least it used to. Tonight is different. I'm sitting in my reading chair by the window, watching the raindrops race down the glass, when I notice something peculiar. The pattern seems deliberate, almost as if the drops are arranging themselves. I shake my head and take another sip of tea. My imagination has always been overactive. It's what drove me to buy this remote cottage in the first place. A writer needs solitude, after all. But there it is again. The raindrops are forming what looks like letters. I lean closer to the window, my breath fogging the glass. I wipe it clear and peer outside. For a moment, I swear I can read a word forming in the rain. Hello? I jerk back from the window, spilling tea on my lap. That's impossible. It's just my mind playing tricks, seeing patterns where there are none. I set down my cup and rub my eyes. When I look again, there are only normal raindrops sliding down the glass. Perhaps I've been alone too long. It's been nearly 2 weeks since I drove into the village for supplies. 2 weeks of nothing but my own thoughts and the manuscript that refuses to be written. I decide to call my sister, just to hear another human voice. But when I reach for my mobile, the screen shows no signal. The storm must be interfering with reception. The landline then. I cross to the small desk and lift the receiver. But there's no dial tone. Just silence. Not silence, actually. Something else. I press the phone closer to my ear. Whispering. Very faint but unmistakable. A voice, barely audible beneath the static, is whispering my name. Hello? Who's there? I demand, but there's no response. Just that same ghostly whisper, repeating my name over and over. I slam the phone down, my heart hammering in my chest. This is ridiculous. I'm allowing myself to get spooked over nothing. The phone lines are down because of the storm. That's all. To distract myself, I decide to work on my manuscript. I open my laptop and stare at the blank document that has been mocking me for weeks. Just as I place my fingers on the keyboard, the lights flicker once, twice, and then go out completely. Power cut. Of course, I should have expected it with a storm this severe. I feel my way to the kitchen drawer, where I keep emergency candles and matches. As I light the first candle, its warm glow is oddly comforting. I carry it back to the main room and set it on the coffee table. The cottage looks different in candlelight. The shadows deeper, the corners darker. The rain seems louder now, without the hum of electricity to compete with it. I stand perfectly still and listen. It's no longer the soothing patter I've always loved. There's a rhythm to it, a purpose. It sounds almost like footsteps circling the cottage. I move to each window in turn, peering out into the darkness, but I can see nothing beyond my own reflection in the glass. The candlelight behind me makes it impossible to see outside. That's when I hear it, a soft scraping at the front door, like fingernails gently dragging across the wood. Who's there? I call out, trying to sound authoritative despite the tremor in my voice. No answer, just more scraping, slightly louder now. It could be a branch blown against the door by the wind. Yes, that's the logical explanation, but there's no wind tonight. The rain falls straight down, heavy and insistent, but the air is still. The scraping stops, and for a moment I think whatever was has gone away. Then it starts again at the back door this time. How did it move so quickly? And so quietly? I grab the poker from beside the fireplace and move toward the back of the cottage. The door is locked, and through the small window, I can see nothing but darkness. The scraping continues, more urgent now, as if whatever is out there knows I'm just on the other side of the door. I've called the police. I lie loudly. They're on their way. The scraping stops abruptly. I wait, holding my breath, the poker clutched tightly in my sweating hands. Then I hear it, soft laughter, barely audible above the rain. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I back away from the door, keeping the poker raised. My back hits something solid, and I spin around with a gasp. It's just the wall. I'm letting my imagination run wild. I return to the main room and add more candles, pushing back the darkness as much as possible. The rain continues its relentless downpour, and I strain my ears for any sound that doesn't belong. For nearly an hour, there's nothing unusual. I begin to relax slightly, convincing myself that I imagined the whole thing. Sleep deprivation and isolation, a dangerous combination for someone with an overactive imagination. I decide to try to get some sleep. Perhaps things will seem less ominous in the morning light. I gather several candles and make my way upstairs to the bedroom, checking that all doors and windows are securely locked as I go. In my bedroom, I place candles on a nightstand and dresser, then sit on the edge of the bed, still fully dressed. I don't think I'll be able to sleep, but I should at least try to rest. That's when I notice the sound has changed. The rain is still falling heavily, but now there's a new noise mixed in with it, a dripping sound coming from inside the house. I follow the sound to the bathroom. In the flickering candlelight, I can see water dripping from the ceiling, not in one place, but in dozens of places, forming small puddles on the tile floor. The roof must be leaking. That's all it is, just a leak. But as I watch, the dripping water begins to form patterns on the floor. The puddles connect, flowing into one another, creating shapes, letters, words. I'm inside. I stumble backward, nearly dropping my candle. The message remains for a moment. Then the water shifts again, the letters dissolving as more drips fall from the ceiling. This isn't real. It can't be real. I back out of the bathroom and slam the door shut. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold the candle. I need to leave. Now. Storm or no storm, I can't stay in this house another minute. I rush downstairs to grab my car keys and jacket. As I reach the bottom step, My candle illuminates the front entryway. Water is seeping in under the front door. A lot of water, more than could be explained by rain alone. It pools on the floor, then begins to rise, flowing toward me with purpose. I retreat up a few steps, watching in horror as the water continues to pour in, soaking the rug, climbing higher. It's ankle deep now and rising fast. This is impossible. The cottage sits on high ground. There's no way it could be flooding like this. I turn to run back upstairs, but freeze when I see what's waiting for me at the top. Water is cascading down the stairs like a waterfall, rushing toward me. I'm trapped between two floods, both behaving in ways that defy natural law. The water reaches my knees, then my waist. It's ice cold, sending shock waves through my body. I struggle to move, to find some escape, but the current is too strong. It pulls at me, trying to drag me under. My candle sputters and goes out, plunging me into darkness. I can hear the water rushing all around me now, filling the cottage, seeking me out specifically. And in the sound of the water, I hear that whispering again. My name, over and over, but this time with a question appended. Don't you remember me? A memory surfaces then. Something I've kept locked away for 20 years. The lake near my childhood home. The girl who followed me there one stormy night. The argument on the dock. Her falling. Where did I push her? The splash. Her screams for help as the dark water took her. My running away, telling no one, letting them all believe she'd simply disappeared. The rain has found me. After all these years, she has found me. The water is at my chest now, still rising. I cling to the banister, fighting to keep my head above water, but it's futile. She's waited 2 decades for this moment. She won't be denied her revenge. As the water closes over my head, I hear her voice one last time. No longer a whisper, but clear as if she were standing right beside me. Now you know what it feels like to drown alone in the dark. The cottage is silent now, save for the gentle patter of rain against the windows. Outside, the storm begins to subside, the deluge reduced to a light shower. By morning, the sun will break through the clouds, revealing a small cottage, peaceful and dry, waiting for its next occupant. They say the rain in these parts sometimes whispers, if you listen closely enough. Most dismiss it as nonsense, the overactive imagination of countryside folk. But I know better. I am the rain now, and I'm still so very, very thirsty. And you, my dear listener, have you ever wronged someone who never found justice? Have you ever committed a sin you thought was safely buried in the past? Listen closely to the rain tonight. That gentle tapping on your window might not be raindrops at all. It might be fingers, my fingers, counting down the moments until I find my way inside. Sleep well. I've always found comfort in the rain. There's something about the steady patter against the roof, the way it transforms the world outside into a blur of gray and blue. It creates a barrier between me and everything else, a liquid curtain that keeps the chaos at bay. Tonight, as the rain falls in sheets outside my window, that comfort feels like a distant memory. 3 weeks ago, I moved into this house, a charming Victorian on the outskirts of town, surrounded by ancient oaks and overgrown gardens. The estate agent called it a diamond in the rough. My friends called it remote and creepy. I called it perfect. After years in a cramped London flat, the space and silence were exactly what I needed. The silence, that's what I noticed first. Not the pleasant quiet of countryside living, but something deeper. An absence, as if the house itself were holding its breath. waiting. The rain started yesterday evening. A gentle drizzle at first, barely audible. I was in my study sorting through old photographs, remnants of a life that seems increasingly like it belonged to someone else. I remember pausing, a faded picture of my mother in my hand, when the first raindrop hit the window. Just one, singular and deliberate, like a fingernail tapping on glass. I glanced outside. The sky was darkening rapidly, clouds gathering like conspirators above the trees. Within minutes, the drizzle became a downpour. I closed the curtains, switched on a lamp, and continued my sorting. That's when I saw it. The photograph at the bottom of the box. I didn't remember taking it. I didn't remember seeing it before at all. But there it was, a Polaroid showing the exterior of this house. My house. Except it wasn't quite right. The windows were different somehow, distorted. And there was a figure standing at the upstairs window, my study window, looking out. Just a silhouette, featureless and dark. I turned the Polaroid over. Written on the back in handwriting I didn't recognize were 4 words. He watches the rain. A chill ran through me, grazing gooseflesh on my arms. I dropped the photograph back into the box and slammed the lid shut. Ridiculous to be spooked by an old picture. The house had previous owners. Perhaps it belonged to one of them, and the figure was probably just a trick of light and shadow. But as I prepared for bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Every creak of the old house, every tap of rain against glass, seemed deliberate, communicative. I pulled the covers up to my chin like a child afraid of monsters and willed myself to sleep. I dreamed of water, of standing in the garden as the rain fell. Looking up at my bedroom window, someone was watching me from inside, my face pressed against the glass, but not my face at all. Something wearing my features like an ill-fitting mask. I woke to darkness and the sound of rainfall, heavier now. My phone said it was 3:17 a.m. That strange, liminal hour when the barrier between what is and what isn't seems thinnest. I lay perfectly still, listening. The rain continued its relentless percussion, but beneath it was another sound. Footsteps, slow, measured steps moving across the floor above me in the study. I live alone. Fear gripped me then, cold and paralyzing. I tried to tell myself it was just a house settling, old timbers contracting in the damp. But houses don't pace. Houses don't stop directly above your bed and stay there, as if looking down to the ceiling at you. I reached for my phone again, intending to call someone, anyone. But the screen remained black, dead. Despite being plugged in all night, the footsteps began again, moving now toward the stairs. My breath caught in my throat. I should run. I should hide. I should do something. But my body refused to obey, frozen in terror beneath the sheets. The steps descended slowly, deliberately. Each creak of the staircase a countdown to something I couldn't bear to face. They reached the bottom, paused, then began moving along the hallway toward my bedroom door. I closed my eyes. Childish, perhaps, but in that moment, I truly believed that if I couldn't see it, it couldn't see me. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Silence followed, broken only by the rain and the thunder of my heartbeat in my ears. The door handle turned. Slowly, agonizingly slowly. I kept my eyes shut, tears leaking from beneath my eyelids. The door creaked open. Something entered the room. I could feel it, a presence colder than the night air, bringing with it the smell of damp earth and decay. It moved to the foot of my bed and stood there, watching, waiting. I don't know how long we remained that way. Me, pretending to sleep, it silently observing. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Eventually, the exhaustion of terror pulled me under, and despite everything, I slept. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean and sparkling. My bedroom door was closed. Everything was exactly as it should be. I almost convinced myself it had all been a nightmare. The photograph, the footsteps, the presence at the foot of my bed. Almost. But then I noticed something on the floor. Footprints. Not muddy prints, but outlines formed in the carpet pile, as if someone with wet feet had stood there for a long time, water gradually seeping into the fibers. They led from the door to the foot of my bed, then back out again, and they weren't human footprints. They were too large, too oddly shaped, with what looked like extra joints and too many toes. I packed a bag immediately. Whatever was happening in this house, I wanted no part of it. I would stay with friends, find a hotel, sleep in my car if necessary, anything to get away. But as I was throwing clothes into a suitcase, the sky outside darkened again. The rain returned, sudden and violent, hammering against the windows with what felt like personal malice. I ran downstairs, grabbing my car keys from a hook by the front door. The door wouldn't open. I twisted the handle, pushed, pulled, even threw my body against it. Nothing. It was as if it had been sealed shut. I tried the back door with the same result. Then the windows, all locked, all immovable. The house had become a trap. That was yesterday. The rain hasn't stopped since. If anything, it's grown more intense, a constant roar that makes it hard to think. I've tried to break the windows with chairs, with books, with anything heavy I can lift. The glass doesn't even crack. It's as if the house is healing itself as quickly as I can wound it. The footsteps returned last night and the night before, always starting in the study, always ending at my bedroom door. But last night, something changed. It didn't just stand at the foot of my bed. It sat beside me. I felt the mattress dip under its weight, felt its cold breath on my face, smelled that earth and decay. It whispered something in a language I didn't understand, but somehow I knew what it wanted. It wants me to look at it. Tonight will be the third night. The rain continues, turning the garden into a swamp, the road into a river. No one will come looking for me, not for days, perhaps weeks. I've blocked the bedroom door with a dresser, but I know it won't help. Whatever is in this house isn't bound by physical barriers. I found more photographs in the study, dozens of them, hidden in books, tucked behind paintings, slipped between the pages of the house's deed. All Polaroids, all showing this house, all with figures at the windows. Different figures, different windows, different times, and all with the same 4 words written on the back. He watches the rain. I understand now. This house is not a house at all. It's a collection point, a waiting room. The rain doesn't bring comfort. It brings him, and he's been collecting for a very long time. The sun is setting now. Not that you can tell through the storm clouds. Another night is coming. I'm sitting in the study, his study, watching the rain blur the world beyond the glass. Waiting. There's a strange peace and acceptance in understanding that some things cannot be escaped. I think I can see him now, reflected in the window glass, standing behind me, smiling with too many teeth in a face that's almost human, but not quite. He's reaching for me with hands that have never known sunlight, and I'm going to turn around. I'm going to look. Do you hear that? The rain against your window? Listen closely. Count the drops. If they fall in a pattern, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. It's already too late. He's found a new window to watch from. a new collection to begin. But don't turn around. Whatever you do, don't turn around. Because he's standing right behind you now. And he's smiling. Everyone loves the sound of rain against the windows at night. The gentle patter that lulls you to sleep makes your bed feel warmer, your home more secure. It's a soundtrack to comfort, isn't it? That's what I always thought. Until 3 months ago, when the rains came to Meadowvale. Our village sits in a valley, surrounded by rolling hills and dense woodland. A picturesque little place that tourists visit in summer to take photographs of the ancient church and quaint cottages with their thatched roofs. We're quite proud of how unchanged we remain while the world rushes headlong into the future. Perhaps that was our mistake. Perhaps we should have changed with the times. Perhaps then we might have been spared. It began with a drought, the worst in living memory. They said, for 6 weeks, not a drop of rain fell. The stream that runs through the village slowed to a trickle, then stopped altogether. Gardens withered. Livestock grew thin and irritable. The air was thick with dust and tension. The village council met in the church hall to discuss water conservation measures. That's when old Morris spoke up. He rarely attended these meetings, preferring the company of his books and his memories to that of people. But that evening, he stood up, leaning heavily on his walking stick, and the room fell silent. Old Morris had been the village schoolmaster for 40 years. When he spoke, people listened. There's another way, he said, his voice cracking with age. A way to bring the rain. Several people exchanged glances. Old Morris had grown eccentric in his retirement. Some said his mind was going. But desperation makes people receptive to ideas they might otherwise dismiss. In the old days, he continued, when the rains wouldn't come, the village would choose a rainmaker. What, like a rain dance? Someone called out, prompting nervous laughter. Old Morris didn't smile. No, not a dance. A sacrifice. The laughter died. The church hall grew very quiet. All that could be heard was the labored wheeze of the ancient ceiling fan stirring the hot, stale air. Just a small sacrifice, old Morris said. Nothing significant. A token, freely given, to appease what sleeps beneath the hills. What sort of token? Asked Sarah, the council chairwoman. Traditionally, a personal item of value. Something precious, gathered from each household and buried at the old well in the woods. The old well. I had almost forgotten it existed. It had been sealed up decades ago after a child fell in. The entrance was concealed by undergrowth now, but locals still avoided the area. There were stories about the well, about what might be down there in the darkness. That's superstitious nonsense, said Martin, the owner of the village pub. We need practical solutions, not fairy stories. But others weren't so quick to dismiss the idea. The drought was affecting business. Crops were failing. Something had to be done. In the end, it was agreed. Each household would contribute an item of personal value. Old Morris would oversee the ritual, such as it was. What harm could it do? At worst, we'd be no better off. At best, well, perhaps the old ways still held some power. The following evening, as the sun set, we gathered at the edge of the woods. Each person carried something. Wedding rings, photographs, treasured books, family heirlooms. I brought my grandfather's pocket watch. It was the only thing of his I had. The only connection to a man I'd never met. I kept it on my bedside table for as long as I could remember. The steady tick-tock, a comforting presence in the night. It had stopped working years ago, but I'd never had it repaired. I was afraid that tampering with it might sever whatever tenuous connection it provided to my family's past. Old Morris led us through the trees, following a path that didn't look like a path until you were on it, though it seemed to grow denser, darker, the further we went. The air felt heavier, charged somehow, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. At last we reached the well. It was smaller than I remembered. A low stone circle almost completely hidden by brambles and ivy. The stone lid that sealed it had been pushed aside, revealing a dark opening like a mouth frozen mid-scream. Place your offerings around the well, Old Morris instructed. Then each person must give 3 drops of blood to seal the covenant. There were murmurs of dissent at this. Blood hadn't been mentioned before. But Old Morris was insistent. A sacrifice isn't a sacrifice unless it costs you something, he said. Just 3 drops, a small price for the rain. One by one, we placed our treasured items in a circle around the well. One by one, we pricked our fingers with the pin Old Morris provided and let 3 drops of blood fall onto our offerings. The blood looked black in the fading light. When the last person had made their sacrifice, Old Morris began to chant in a language none of us recognized. It wasn't Latin or any modern tongue. The syllables seemed to catch in the air, hovering like mist. I felt a crawling sensation on the back of my neck, as if something were watching us from the trees. Several people made nervous signs of the cross. Old Morris finished his chant with a word that seemed to physically strike the air. Then he gestured for us to help him. Together, we pushed the offerings into the well. I heard my grandfather's watch hit something with a splash far below. Water. There was still water down there. "It is done," Old Morris said. "The covenant is made. The rain will come." We walked back to the village in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Had we just participated in some harmless folk ritual or something darker? I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line, opened a door that should have remained closed. That night, I dreamed the well. In my dream, it wasn't sealed. It was open and something was climbing out, something that had been waiting a very long time. I woke to the sound of rain. It started gently, a soft patter against the windows. By morning, it was a steady downpour. The village celebrated. Gardens were watered, water but spilled. Livestock led to freshly forming puddles. No one mentioned the ritual. It was easier to believe that the rain was simply a natural break in the drought. But I noticed something strange about the rain. It didn't fall everywhere. It fell only within the boundaries of Meadowvale. Travelers reported dry roads and dusty fields just a mile away in any direction. Only our village received the blessing of water, and it didn't stop. Days passed, then weeks. The stream became a torrent. Fields turned to marshland. Basements flooded. Roads became rivers. Still the rain continued, a constant percussion on rooftops and windows, drowning out all other sounds. And there were other changes. Subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. Plants grew with unnatural speed, but they weren't quite right. Flowers the wrong color, leaves with too many points. Fruit that smelled sweet but tasted of rot. Animals behaved strangely. Pets cowered and hissed at nothing. Wildlife ventured into the village in broad daylight, standing in the rain and watching the houses with 2 intelligent eyes. People changed too. Those who had participated in the ritual began to look different, not in any way you could immediately identify, just wrong somehow. Their movements too fluid or too jerky. Their smiles too wide. Their eyes reflecting light that wasn't there. I noticed in myself as well. My skin had perpetual shimmer, as if always slightly damp. My hearing had become extraordinarily acute. I could hear conversations through walls, heartbeats across rooms. And the rain spoke to me, not in words, but in a language of rhythm and tone that I somehow understood. It was telling me to return to the well. Others felt it too. I would see them walking toward the woods at odd hours, drawn by the same call. We never spoke of it, never acknowledged each other, but I knew they were going to the same place. The well was hungry again. Last night, I finally answered the call. I walked through the downpour to the edge of the woods. The path was a flowing stream now, but I could still follow it. The trees had grown impossibly tall, their branches interlacing to form a canopy that kept the ground beneath relatively dry. The only sound was the drum of rain on leaves far above. The well was transformed. The stone circle now rose 3 feet above the ground, the masonry intricate with carvings that seemed to move when viewed from the corner of the eye. The opening was wider, and a soft, pulsing light emanated from deep within. I wasn't alone. Others from the village stood around the well, their faces illuminated by that strange light. No one spoke. We didn't need to. We understood what was required. One by one, we approached the well and cut our palms, letting blood drip into the opening. The light pulsed stronger with each offering. I was the last. As my blood joined the others, the light flared blindingly bright, then extinguished completely. From the darkness of the well, something began to climb. I won't describe what emerged. Human language lacks the vocabulary for such things. It was ancient from a time before time. It had been sleeping beneath our village since before there was a village. Our ancestors had known about it, had entered into the covenant we had unwittingly renewed. It looked at us with eyes that weren't eyes and spoke with a voice that wasn't a voice. It told us what it wanted, what it had always wanted. It wanted to spread beyond the village, beyond the valley. It wanted the rain to fall everywhere, and we would be its vessels, its rainmakers. This morning, 20 of us left Meadowvale in different directions. The rain follows each of us, a personal storm cloud that never dissipates. Wherever we go, the rain will fall, and in that rain are seeds, microscopic spores of what lives in the well. They take root in everything they touch, soil, plants, animals, people. I'm coming to your town soon, or perhaps one of the others is. You'll know us by the rain that accompanies us. Constant, gentle, soothing rain, the kind that makes you want to stay indoors, safe and warm in your bed, listening to the comforting patter against your windows. Don't fear us. Don't fight us. After all, everyone loves the sound of rain at night. And soon, very soon, the whole world will be Meadowvale. Are those raindrops on your window now? Listen carefully. Is it just water, or do you hear something else? A pattern, a voice, a summons. The well is calling, and the rain always finds a way in. They say you should never ignore a leaking roof. Water finds its way through the smallest cracks, seeping into wood, bloating plaster, creating the perfect environment for mold to flourish. Given enough time, it can bring down the sturdiest structures, turning homes into husks. I've been a carpenter for 30 years, and I've seen what water can do when left unchecked. But the roof at Blackthorn Manor wasn't leaking. Not exactly. I was called there in early October, after 6 days of unrelenting rain. The sort of heavy, persistent deluge that makes you wonder if it might never stop. The manor stood on a hill overlooking the village, a Victorian monstrosity of stone and timber that had passed through generations of the same family, until the last of them died without heirs. It had been empty for nearly a decade before a London couple purchased it 6 months ago. Renovators. The sort who buy decaying properties and transform them into luxury homes with all the modern conveniences hidden behind period features. I'd turned down work at Blackthorn before. Something about the place had always unsettled me, even as a child. The way it loomed against the sky, its windows like vacant eyes watching the village below. But the new owners were offering triple my usual rate, and winter was coming. I couldn't afford to be choosy. The drive up to the manor was treacherous, the rain turning the unpaved road into a quagmire that threatened to swallow my van. By the time I arrived, my nerves were frayed, and my mood was as dark as the storm clouds overhead. The front door opened before I could knock. A woman stood there, thin and pale, with the look of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Caroline Elliott, one of the new owners. "Thank God you've come," she said, pulling me inside. "It's getting worse." The entrance hall was grand but dilapidated, with peeling wallpaper and a chandelier that had shed most of its crystals. Water damage was immediately evident in the large dark stains spreading across the ceiling. "When did the leaking start?" I asked, already mentally calculating the scope of the job. "3 nights ago," she replied. "But it's not what you think. It's not coming from outside." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "It's better if I show you." She led me upstairs, past rooms in various states of renovation, to a narrow door at the end of a corridor. It opened onto a steep staircase leading to the attic. The sound of rainfall was louder here, a steady drumming that seemed to surround us. The attic was vast, running the length of the house, its rafters exposed and its floor covered in dust except for a clear path where footsteps had traveled back and forth. Rainwater had indeed found multiple entry points, forming puddles on the warped floorboards. But that wasn't what made me stop in my tracks. In the center of the attic, directly beneath the highest point of the roof, was a perfect circle of water, not a puddle formed by a leak, but a deliberate ring, about 6 feet in diameter, as if someone had carefully poured water in an exact pattern. Inside the circle, the floor was dry. "It appeared 3 nights ago," Caroline said. "We thought it was just a strange leak at first, but look." She pointed to the roof above the circle. There was no visible damage, no missing slates, no gap for water to enter. "That's unusual," I said, falling back on English understatement. "Have you tried mopping it up?" She gave a brittle laugh. "Of course. It comes back, always in the same pattern. Always bone dry in the middle." I knelt beside the circle, careful not to touch it. The water was clear and still, reflecting the rafters above like a mirror. It didn't behave like normal water. There was no seepage into the surrounding wood, no spreading. "What about the rest of the leaks?" I asked, gesturing to the more conventional puddles nearby. "They started after, more each night, but this," she pointed to the circle, "this was first." I stood up, brushing dust from my knees. "I'm not sure I can help you with this, Mrs. Elliott. It doesn't look like a structural issue. What I didn't say was that it didn't look natural at all." "Please," she said, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "My husband thinks I'm imagining things. He's in London on business, and he won't be back until next week. I can't stay here alone with this." Her desperation was palpable, and despite my misgivings, I found myself nodding. "I'll take a closer look at the roof. Maybe there's an explanation we're missing." I spent the rest of the afternoon examining the roof, inside and out. The rain continued unabated, making the exterior inspection treacherous, but I was thorough. What I found made no sense. There were indeed several minor leaks that needed repair, but nothing that could explain the perfect circle of water in the attic. The area directly above was sound, the slates intact, the timber underneath dry and solid. By the time I descended from the roof, dusk was falling and the rain had intensified. Caroline was waiting in the kitchen, a large room that had been partially modernized with gleaming appliances that looked out of place against the ancient stone walls. "Well," she asked, handing me a towel. "I can fix the general leaks," I said, drying my hair. "But the circle, I can't find a source. It's as if the water is coming from inside the house, not outside." She nodded, as if this confirmed something she already suspected. "That's what I thought. It's the house itself. It's crying." I might have laughed if she hadn't looked so earnest, so haunted. Instead, I frowned. "Houses don't cry, Mrs. Elliot." "This one does," she said simply. "Since we started the renovations, it's trying to tell us something." I sighed. I'd encountered homeowners with unusual theories before. Old houses creak and settle. They have their quirks. People attribute meaning to random events, especially in places with as much history as Blackthorn Manor. "Look," I said gently, "I'll come back tomorrow with materials to fix the actual leaks. As for the circle, perhaps you should consider having a surveyor take a look, or a plumber. It could be condensation from pipes in the ceiling space." She shook her head but didn't argue. "It's too late to drive back in this weather. You should stay the night. We have plenty of guest rooms that are habitable." I hesitated. The thought of spending the night at Blackthorn Manor was deeply unappealing. But she was right about the weather. The rain was now a torrent, and the road down to the village would be treacherous in the dark. "Thank you," I said finally. "That's very kind." She showed me to a room on the second floor, one of the few that seemed completely renovated. It was comfortable, with a large bed and modern ensuite bathroom. The rain continued its relentless percussion against the windows. "I'll be just down the hall if you need anything," Caroline said, lingering at the door. "And Mr. Winters, thank you for believing me about the water." I hadn't said I believed her theory about the house crying, but I didn't correct her. Sometimes people just need to feel heard. After she left, I showered and changed into the spare clothes I kept in my van for jobs that ran long. I was exhausted but oddly alert, every sense heightened. The rain seemed louder now, more insistent, as if demanding attention. Sleep eluded me. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the storm, to the house creaking and sighing around me. Old timber expanding and contracting in the damp. That's all it was. Perfectly normal. So why couldn't I shake the feeling that the sounds were deliberate? That the house was aware of my presence? It was just after midnight when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, distinct from the rain. It seemed to come from inside the walls. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap, tap. Like a heartbeat. Or Morse code. I sat up, straining to listen. The tapping continued, then began to move, traveling through the walls, up toward the ceiling, then down again, following a path through the house. I got out of bed and pressed my ear against the wall. The tapping was louder now, accompanied by a sound like water running through pipes. But Blackthorn Manor was old. Any original plumbing would have been primitive. The renovations weren't complete. These walls shouldn't have contained modern pipework yet. Curiosity overcame apprehension. I grabbed my torch and stepped into the hallway. The tapping was clearer here, moving along the corridor toward the attic stairs. I followed, my bare feet silent on the plush new carpet. The attic door stood ajar, though I was certain Caroline had closed it when we left earlier. A faint blue light spilled onto the landing, flickering like moonlight reflected off water. But there was no moon tonight, only storm clouds and endless rain. I climbed the attic stairs slowly, each step creaking beneath my weight despite my attempt at stealth. The tapping had stopped, replaced by a gentle lapping sound, like small waves against the shore. The sight that greeted me at the top of the stairs stole the breath from my lungs. The circle of water had expanded to fill most of the attic floor, a perfect mirror reflecting a night sky I couldn't possibly be seeing. Stars and full moon, not the stormy darkness outside. The surface rippled gently, though there was no breeze. And in the center, where the floor had been dry before, now stood a figure. It was human in shape, but not in substance. It appeared to be made entirely of water, its form constantly flowing, never quite solid, features forming and dissolving like faces glimpsed in clouds. It was looking right at me. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My torch slipped from my nerveless fingers and rolled across the floor, stopping at the edge of the impossible pool. The figure raised what might have been an arm, beckoning me forward. The surface of the water rippled outward from its feet, lapping at the edges of the attic. "What are you?" I finally managed to whisper. The response wasn't in words, but in images that flooded my mind. The manor as it once was, vibrant and full of life. The generations that had lived and died here. The grief when the last of the bloodline passed. The pain as walls were torn down, floors ripped up, the very bones of the house broken, and remade to suit new owners with no connection to its history. The house wasn't crying. It was drowning. The water figure took a step toward me, its movement creating waves that pushed my torch back toward my feet. I understood then. It wanted me to leave. It was warning me. I backed away, down the first few steps. "Caroline," I said, "I need to warn her." The figure shook its head, a spray of droplets catching the strange light. More images filled my mind. Caroline and her husband, tearing out original features, installing garish modern replacements, treating the house as nothing more than a project, an investment. They were the ones the house wanted gone. I turned and fled down the stairs, my only thought to get out of the manor before whatever was happening in the attic spread. As I reached the second floor landing, I heard a new sound beneath the rain, a roar like a bursting dam, followed by Caroline's scream. Water cascaded down the hallway from the direction of the room. Not ordinary rainwater, but the same glowing blue liquid from the attic. It surged forward, a sentient flood seeking to consume everything in its path. I ran for the main staircase, the water right behind me. Caroline appeared at her doorway, nightgown soaked, eyes wild with terror. "The circle," she screamed. "It's in my room. It's everywhere." I reached for her hand, but the water surged between us, knocking her back into her room and slamming the door. Her screams were abruptly silenced. The flood was rising rapidly, already ankle deep and climbing. I splashed through it to the stairs, nearly losing my footing on the first step. The front door seemed miles away, and I knew with certainty that I wouldn't reach it before the water overtook me. But then the flood receded, pulling back like the ocean before a tsunami. It formed a path for me, clear and dry, straight to the door, an escape route. I didn't question this mercy. I ran, expecting at any moment to feel the water at my heels, but it held back. The door unlocked itself as I approached, swinging open to reveal the night and the natural rain beyond. I stumbled outside and down the manor's front steps. Only when I reached my van did I look back. Blackthorn Manor was transforming before my eyes. Water poured from every window, not out but in, as if the rain itself were being drawn into the house. The walls shimmered and blurred, stone and timber becoming liquid, the entire structure melting like a sandcastle at high tide. Within minutes, nothing remained but a perfect, circular lake where Blackthorn Manor had stood for over a century. Its surface was still despite the rain, reflecting stars and moon that were not in the sky. The storm ended abruptly. The clouds dispersed. A true night sky emerged, but with no moon and fewer stars than had been reflected in the lake. I never reported what happened. Who would believe me? A house that turned to water, taking its unwanted occupant with it. They found Caroline's husband's body a week later, when he returned to find his property transformed into an unexplained geological feature. He'd apparently fallen into the lake and drowned, though no one could explain why he hadn't simply swum to the edge. The lake remains, eerily circular and unnaturally still. Scientists have conducted studies, geologists have taken samples, but no one can explain its sudden appearance or perfect shape. Local legend already calls it Blackthorn Lake and warns against swimming in its waters. As for me, I've given up carpentry. I can't look at wooden beams or stone walls without seeing water behind them, waiting to break through. I've moved inland to a place where it seldom rains. I don't tell my story. I don't have to. Others have their own tales of structures that weren't quite as solid as they seemed, of buildings with memories and grudges. We think we're the architects of our world, imposing our will on passive materials. But some places have been here far longer than us. They've absorbed centuries of life and death, joy and sorrow. They remember, and sometimes they decide they've endured enough change. The next time it rains, listen carefully to your home. Those aren't just pipes knocking or gutters overflowing. That rhythmic tapping has a pattern, a meaning. Your house is trying to tell you something, and you really should listen before the waters rise. There's something peculiar about the rain in this part of the country. I first noticed it 3 months ago, shortly after moving into my grandmother's cottage. I'd inherited the place after her passing, a quaint stone dwelling on the edge of a small village, surrounded by mist-shrouded moors and ancient woodlands. It was a perfect retreat for finishing my novel, far from London's constant noise and distraction. The locals were polite but reserved, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes when they spoke to me. Outsider. Their glances seemed to say, though my grandmother had lived among them for 40 years, perhaps blood ties weren't enough. Perhaps one had to be born here to truly belong. The first unusual rainfall came on a Tuesday evening in late September. I was working at my desk by the window, struggling with a particularly difficult chapter, when the first drops hit the glass. The sound immediately struck me as wrong. Too heavy, too deliberate, like fingers tapping to get my attention. I looked up from my laptop. The rain was falling in thick, viscous droplets that clung to the window before slowly sliding down, leaving iridescent trails like snail tracks. Each drop caught the lamplight and split it into prismatic colors that shouldn't have been possible in the gathering darkness. Curious, I opened the window and held out my hand. The rain felt cold but not wet, more like tiny beads of gelatin landing on my skin. They didn't immediately dissolve like normal raindrops. Instead, they sat there, quivering slightly, before gradually melting away. They left no moisture behind, only a slight tingling sensation and the faintest smell of ozone. I withdrew my hand and closed the window, telling myself it was just some quirk of local weather, perhaps pollution from a nearby factory or mineral content from the surrounding hills. There would be a perfectly reasonable explanation. The rain lasted precisely 17 minutes. I know because I timed it, fascinated by its strange consistency and the way it stopped as abruptly as it had begun, as if a tap had been turned off. The night sky cleared immediately, revealing stars of unusual brightness. I mentioned the strange rainfall to Mrs. Bellwether at the village shop the next morning. She was arranging jars of homemade jam on a shelf and froze at my words, her hand tightening around a jar of blackberry preserves. "Best not to pay it any mind," she said without turning. "Just weather, isn't it? Nothing special about rain." But there was something in her voice, a tightness, a warning, that told me otherwise. I asked others in the village, the postman, the barman at the local pub, the elderly man who walked his 3 identical spaniels past my cottage each morning. Their reactions were all similar. Averted eyes, changing the subject, quick excuses to be elsewhere. It was clear they knew something they weren't willing to share. I might have let it go, might have focused on my novel and dismissed the strange rain as an anomaly if it hadn't returned exactly 1 week later. Same time, same consistency, same 17-minute duration. This time, I took photographs and shot a short video on my phone. The rain appeared normal in the images, just water falling from the sky. But I knew what I had felt, what I had seen with my own eyes. The disconnect was disorienting. The third rainfall came precisely 1 week after the second. By now, I was prepared. I had set up a small glass dish outside to collect samples and bought a basic microscope online. Whatever this substance was, I would examine it myself. The rain began at exactly 8:43 p.m., just as before. I watched from the doorway as the thick droplets splattered into the glass dish. When the 17 minutes were up, I brought the dish inside, careful not to spill. Under the microscope, what I saw defied explanation. The raindrops weren't water at all. They were composed of tiny, translucent spheres, each containing what appeared to be minuscule moving particles, like cells with something alive inside them. I sat back, heart racing. This wasn't pollution or mineral deposits. This was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist. I needed to know more. The next day, I visited the village library, a small room attached to the community hall, staffed part-time by a sour-faced woman named Ms. Price. I asked if they had any local history books, specifically anything about unusual weather phenomena in the area. Her thin lips pressed together in disapproval. "Local history are for locals," she said. "Not much interest outsiders." "I'm not an outsider," I insisted. "My grandmother was Eliza Marlowe. This is my home now." Something flickered in Miss Price's eyes at the mention of my grandmother's name. Eliza's grandchild? She never mentioned the family. "We weren't close," I admitted, "but she left me the cottage, so here I am." Miss Price studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "Wait here." She disappeared into a back room and returned with a dusty, leather-bound book. "This isn't on the regular shelves," she said, placing it on the counter between us. "Bring it back tomorrow. Don't let anyone see you with it." The book was titled Chronicles of the Parish, accounts of notable occurrences. It had no author listed and appeared to be a handwritten journal spanning several generations, with the earliest entries dating back to the 1700s. The handwriting changed every few decades, suggesting it had been maintained by successive chroniclers. I took it home and began reading immediately. Most entries were mundane, records of births, deaths, crop yields, and weather patterns. But scattered throughout were accounts of what the writers called a visitation, a strange rainfall that came at regular intervals, always lasting exactly 17 minutes. The descriptions matched what I had experienced. Thick, gelatinous droplets that left no moisture, falling in a precise pattern. The chroniclers noted that the visitation always coincided with certain celestial alignments and was considered a blessing by the villagers. A blessing? That seemed odd, given how reluctant modern villagers were to discuss it. I read further, searching for explanations. According to the chronicles, the unusual rain had first appeared after a period of devastating drought in 1723. The crops were failing, livestock dying, the village on the brink of starvation. The local pastor, a man named Reverend Abernathy, had led the villagers in 7 days of prayer, seeking divine intervention. On the seventh night, the strange rain fell for the first time. The next day, the failing crops had not only recovered but were flourishing beyond all natural expectation. Livestock that had been sickly were suddenly robust and fertile. The village's fortunes were transformed overnight. In gratitude, Reverend Abernathy established a covenant. The village would make a sacrifice every 7th year to ensure the rain's return. The nature of the sacrifice was not specified in the earlier entries, described only as that which is most precious, freely given. Later entries became more explicit. The sacrifice was a person, one villager chosen by lot every 7 years, who would walk out onto the moor during the visitation and allow themselves to be taken, absorbed by the rain. I closed the book, feeling ill. Surely this was just superstition, a dark folktale preserved alongside legitimate historical records. Human sacrifice couldn't possibly have continued into the modern era. The current villagers' reluctance to discuss the rain must stem from embarrassment over their ancestors' primitive beliefs. But doubt gnawed at me. The rain was real and definitely not normal. If that part of the chronicle was true, what else might be? I checked the dates in the book against the calendar. If the 7-year cycle had continued uninterrupted, the next sacrifice would be due this year, this month, in fact. Following the pattern of weekly rainfall I'd observed, the culmination would occur after 7 visitations. I had witnessed 3 already. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cottage felt different somehow, as if the walls were listening, judging. I thought about leaving, driving back to London and never returning. But curiosity kept me rooted. I had to know the truth. The 4th rainfall came right on schedule. This time, I noticed something new. The drops didn't fall randomly, but in concentric circles, like ripples spreading outward from the center of the village. From my window, I could see neighbors standing in their doorways, watching the sky with expressions I couldn't quite interpret. Reverence? Fear? Anticipation? After the rain stopped, the night was filled with low humming sound, just at the threshold of hearing. It seemed to come from the ground itself, a vibration more felt than heard. I pressed my ear to the floor, and the humming resolved into what sounded like distant voices, chanting in unison in a language I didn't recognize. The 5th rainfall brought a new development. As the thick drops fell, I noticed small, glowing motes suspended within them. Tiny points of bluish light that pulse like heartbeats. They remained visible for several seconds after each drop landed, then gradually faded. The air smelled of electricity and something else, something ancient and organic, like peat bogs and standing stones. That night, I dreamed of walking on the moor during a rainfall. The drops didn't avoid me but seemed attracted to my presence, coating my skin in a luminous second layer. In the dream, I could feel them sinking into me, becoming part of me, altering me on some fundamental level. I woke gasping, my body covered in sweat that glowed faintly in the darkness before fading to normal. The day before the 6th rainfall, Mrs. Bellwether stopped me as I was leaving the village shop. "You've been asking questions," she said, her voice low, "reading things you shouldn't." I started to deny it, but she shook her head. "Miss Price told me about the book. You need to understand, some traditions exist for a reason. Traditions like human sacrifice." I challenged. Her expression hardened. "Is it sacrifice to become part of something greater? To ascend beyond this limited existence?" She gripped my arm with surprising strength. "Your grandmother understood. That's why she came here. That's why she stayed." I pulled away. "What are you talking about? My grandmother moved here for the quiet life after my grandfather died." Mrs. Bellwether smiled sadly. "Is that what you were told? Eliza came here because she knew what the rain offers. She was chosen 35 years ago. She was supposed to be the one, but at the last moment, she refused her ascension. Another had to take her place." Her eyes grew distant. "My Thomas, my son." I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. "That's insane. You're talking about murder." "No," she said firmly. "Transformation, evolution. The rain chooses those with potential, those who can become more than human." She leaned closer. "Haven't you felt it calling to you? Haven't you felt its touch changing you already?" I thought of my dream, of the strange sensations I'd been experiencing since the first rainfall. Heightened senses, moments of impossible clarity, the faint blue luminescence of my sweat and tears. "The 7th rainfall comes tomorrow," Mrs. Bellwether continued. "The choosing will happen. It should have been your grandmother's responsibility to explain, to prepare you. But since she didn't," she pressed something into my hand, a small, smooth stone with symbols carved into its surface. "Keep this with you. When the time comes, you'll know what to do." She turned and walked away, leaving me holding the stone and feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath my feet. That night, I reread the Chronicle, focusing on entries from around the time my grandmother would have arrived in the village. There it was in faded ink. Eliza Marlowe, chosen but unfulfilled. Thomas Bellwether ascended in her stead. Further reading revealed more. The choosing wasn't random at all. The rain selected those with particular genetic predisposition, identifiable by how their bodies reacted to preliminary rainfalls. Those who showed signs of luminescence were candidates for ascension. My grandmother had been chosen, but had somehow rejected her ascension. And now, after 7 visitations, another choosing would occur. Given what I'd experienced, the dreams, the glowing sweat, I feared I might be among the candidates. The 6th rainfall came with new intensity. The droplets were larger, their movement more deliberate. They seemed to assess everything they touched, like intelligent probes mapping the village and its inhabitants. I watched from behind closed windows. The stone Mrs. Bellwether had given me clutched tightly in my palm. It grew warm as the rain fell, vibrating slightly in rhythm with a distant humming. After the rain stopped, I noticed lights on the moor. Villagers carrying lanterns, gathering in a circle around what appeared to be an ancient standing stone I'd never noticed before. I watched through binoculars as they prepared the site, placing smaller stones and patterns around the central monolith. They were preparing for tomorrow, for the 7th rainfall, for the choosing. I spent the night in a state of heightened awareness, every sense painfully sharp. I could hear conversations from houses hundreds of meters away, could see with perfect clarity in the darkness. My skin had taken on a subtle luminescence, visible when I cupped my hands together. I was changing, becoming something else. The rain had marked me. By morning, I had made my decision. I packed a small bag and got into my car, intending to drive as far away as possible before the seventh rainfall began. But as I turned the key, nothing happened. The engine was dead. I tried my phone to call for help. No service. I was trapped. As evening approached, a dense fog rolled in from the moor, encircling the village. Through my window, I could see villagers emerging from their homes, walking with purpose toward the standing stone. Something pulled at me, urging me to join them. The stone in my pocket pulsed like a second heart. At exactly 8:43 p.m., the seventh rainfall began. The droplets were enormous now, the size of golf balls, and they fell with deliberate precision. Each one contained a universe of swirling lights, like galaxies in miniature. Where they landed, plants grew with unnatural speed, twisting toward the sky in spiraling patterns. I felt myself moving toward the door without conscious decision, drawn by an irresistible force. Outside, the rain parted around me, creating a dry path that led toward the moor, toward the standing stone where the villagers had gathered. I tried to resist, to turn back, but my body wasn't entirely my own anymore. As I approached the circle of villagers, they parted to let me through. At the center stood Mrs. Bellwether, her face solemn, but her eyes gleaming with what looked like triumph. "The rain has chosen," she announced, "as it chose your grandmother before you." The stone in my pocket burned now, and I drew it out instinctively. In the presence of the rainfall, the carved symbols glowed with the same blue light I had seen within the droplets. "What happens now?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "Ascension," Mrs. Bellwether said. "You will become one with the rain. Your consciousness will expand beyond the limitations of human existence. You will join the others who came before, who watch over us and ensure our prosperity. And if I refuse, like my grandmother did," her expression hardened, "then another must take your place, a less suitable vessel, with less chance of successful transformation. Their suffering would be on your conscience, as Thomas's was on Eliza's." I looked around at the villagers. Their faces were expectant, reverent. This wasn't a sacrificial cult in the traditional sense. They genuinely believed they were offering me something transcendent, something beyond normal human experience. And perhaps they were right. The changes I had already undergone, the heightened senses, the connection I felt to the strange rainfall, these suggested something more complex than superstition. The standing stone before me began to glow with the same blue luminescence that now emanated from my skin. The symbols carved into its surface matched those on the smaller stone I held. As I watched, the massive monolith shifted, revealing a cavity within, a doorway of sorts, filled with swirling, rain-like material that defied gravity, flowing in impossible patterns. Mrs. Bellwether spoke again, her voice blending with a humming that filled the air. "The doorway opens only for the chosen, and only during the seventh rainfall. Step through and complete what your grandmother could not." I stood at the threshold of something incomprehensible, something that challenged everything I understood about reality. Was this alien technology disguised as weather, as the chronicles hinted? Was it truly some form of ascension, a transformation into something beyond human? Or was it a trap, a harvesting of human consciousness for purposes I couldn't begin to imagine? The rain continued to fall around us, each drop containing those strange, living lights. They called to me, resonating with whatever changes had already been wrought in my body. I could feel myself responding, cells vibrating in harmony with the rainfall. I thought my grandmother, who had stood where I now stood, who had faced this same choice. She had refused, had lived a quiet life in her cottage, perhaps forever haunted by the knowledge that another had taken her place, had undergone whatever transformation she had rejected. The humming grew louder, the blue glow more intense. I felt myself drawn toward the doorway, my body moving of its own accord. This close, I could see through the swirl of material to somewhere else, a place of impossible geometry and light, where shapes moved that had never been human, but somehow felt familiar. They were waiting for me, had been waiting for generations. Their patience as measured and deliberate as the rainfall they sent. What falls with the rain is change, transformation, evolution. What falls with the rain is choice. I took a step forward, and then another. The swirling doorway enveloped me, cool and electric against my skin. I felt myself dissolving, consciousness expanding outward like ripples from a droplet, connecting with others who had come before. I understood then. The rain wasn't water. It was them, tiny fragments of their consciousness, sent to find suitable vessels for expansion, for reproduction, for growth. And now I am them. I am the rain. I fall from skies across dimensions, seeking others like me, those with the capacity to become more, to transcend their limited forms and join our collective consciousness. Perhaps you felt me. Those raindrops that seem heavier than they should be, that leave your skin tingling, that fall in patterns too precise to be random. Listen closely the next time rain falls outside your window. That's not just water you hear. It's footsteps. It's breath. It's voices calling your name. It's me, knocking to come in. Will you open the door? The first time I met Eleanor Blackwood, it was raining, not the gentle patter that lulls you to sleep, but proper English downpour. Relentless sheets of water turned the world gray and indistinct. I'd taken shelter in a small antique shop in Coventry, shaking the rain from my umbrella, when I noticed her standing by a display of Victorian curiosities. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, her posture perfect despite her age. What caught my attention, however, was a collection of small glass vials she was examining with intense focus. Each contained what appeared to be water. "Beautiful, aren't they?" she said without looking up, somehow aware of my gaze. Each one unique, each one precious. I moved closer, curious. The vials were exquisite, hand-blown glass with silver stoppers, arranged in a velvet-lined wooden case. "Their rainwater?" I asked, noting the handwritten labels with dates and locations. She smiled, then finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were a startling pale blue, almost colorless. Not just rainwater. Memories, history, lives. Something in her tone sent a chill through me, despite the stuffiness of the shop. But as a doctoral student researching Victorian collecting practices, I was intrigued. Victorians collected everything: insects, plants, hair jewelry, death masks. Why not rainwater? "I'm David Hughes," I said, extending my hand. "I'm doing my PhD on Victorian collection culture." Eleanor Blackwood. Her hand was cool and dry despite the dampness in the air. "Perhaps you'd like to see my complete collection? It's quite extensive. Might be useful for your research." That was how it began. A chance encounter on a rainy day that would ultimately lead me to question everything I understood about the nature reality and of rain itself. Eleanor lived in a grand Victorian house on the outskirts of the city, a looming structure of red brick and gables that seemed to exist in its own pocket of perpetual twilight. The gardens were lush but untamed, dripping with moisture even on dry days, as if the house generated its own microclimate. I visited first on academic pretense, notebook in hand, prepared to document another eccentric collection from my thesis. Eleanor guided me through rooms filled with the expected Victorian clutter. taxidermy under glass domes, botanical specimens pressed between sheets of yellowing paper, cabinets of curiosities from distant lands. But it was the Rain collection that dominated. Thousands of vials lined the walls of her study, arranged chronologically for what she claimed was 1837, the beginning of Victoria's reign, to the present day. Each was meticulously labeled with date and location and what Eleanor called atmospheric conditions. My family has collected the Rain for generations, she explained, running a finger along a row of vials from the 1890s. We understand its importance, its power. Each rainfall is unique. You see, each carries something different. I nodded politely, noting details from my research, while privately thinking this was merely an unusual manifestation of the Victorian collecting mania that continued in this family through to the present day. Would you like to see how it's done? She asked. Outside, the clouds had gathered again, heavy and dark despite it being early afternoon. Eleanor led me to a small glass conservatory attached to the rear of the house. Instead of plants, it contained an array of bizarre contraptions, glass tubes, silver funnels, copper coils, and mechanisms I couldn't begin to identify. My ancestors began with simple methods: bowls left in the garden, extended hands, mouths open to the sky. Eleanor adjusted a delicate glass apparatus, but they learned. They refined the process. Rain must be collected properly to preserve what it contains. Before I could ask what she meant, the rain began, huge drops hammering against the glass roof of the conservatory. Eleanor moved with sudden urgency, positioning containers, turning valves, activating her strange machinery. The rain was captured, channeled, processed through various tubes and filters before finally dripping into a small crystal vial. "Perfect," she murmured, holding the vial up to examine the collected water. "This will be a particularly good one. I can tell by the taste in the air." She offered the vial to me. "Would you like to see?" I hesitated. Something about her intensity, the strange gleam in her colorless eyes, made me uneasy. But academic curiosity won out. I accepted the vial and held it up to the light. At first, it appeared to be ordinary water, but as I watched, something shifted within the liquid. A swirl of color, a suggestion of movement, like ink dropped into water, but more purposeful, more defined. For just a moment, I thought I saw a face not reflected, but contained within the water itself. I nearly dropped the vial. Eleanor caught it smoothly, her expression knowing. "What was that?" I demanded, my heart racing. "Some kind of trick?" "Not a trick, David. A memory, a moment, a life caught in the rainfall." She carefully stopped the vial and added it to a wooden rack with others from the day's collection. Rain remembers, you see. It absorbs. It preserves. Each droplet that falls has fallen before, countless times throughout history, and each time it takes something with it. I left shortly after, attributing what I'd seen to a trick of the light, perhaps even a deliberate deception on Eleanor's part. But I returned the following week, and the week after that, despite my skepticism, or perhaps because of it, I was drawn to Eleanor's Rain collection and her strange theories. She showed me vials from significant dates in history. The day Victoria was crowned, the Great Exhibition of 1851, the Jack the Ripper murders, the Blitz, each, she claimed, contained not just rainwater, but echoes of the events that transpired as the rain fell. Rain is the world's oldest witness, she told me one evening as we sat in her study, a storm raging outside. It falls on murderers and victims alike, on celebrations and tragedies, on births and deaths. It carries away microscopic pieces of everything it touches: skin cells, blood, tears, pollen, dust, but also less tangible things: emotions, memories, souls. I smiled indulgently. "That's poetic, Eleanor, but hardly scientific." I smiled indulgently. That's poetic, Eleanor, but hardly scientific. Science is just what we call magic we've come to understand. She selected a vial from 1888, labeled simply Miller's Court, November 9th. The Jack the Ripper's most brutal murder. Would you like to really see? Not just glimpse, but truly experience what the rain has witnessed. She didn't wait for my answer, but unstopped the vial and placed a single drop of the ancient rainwater on her tongue. Then, before I could protest, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to mine. The study dissolved around me. I was standing in a narrow London street. Gaslight struggling against thick fog, rain falling in a dismal curtain. I could smell the sewage, the smoke, a particular stench of poverty in Victorian London, and blood. So much blood, metallic, and hot despite the cold rain. I was outside a shabby room, but somehow I could see inside, could see the horror taking place within. I tried to close my eyes, to look away, but I had no control. I was forced to witness everything, to feel the rain falling on the cobblestones, on the murderer's hat, on the windowsill of that terrible room. The rain remembered, and now so would I. When I came back to myself, I was on my knees in Eleanor's study, retching, my body tried to physically expel the memory that had been forced upon it. Eleanor stood over me, her expression a mixture of sympathy and satisfaction. Now you understand, she said. The rain doesn't just collect water. It collects experiences. I should have left then. Should have run from that house and never returned. But the academic in me, the researcher, the knowledge seeker, that part was irresistibly intrigued. And perhaps another part, a darker part, was drawn to the power that Eleanor's collection represented. Over the following months, I became her apprentice of sorts. She taught me how to collect the rain properly, how to identify rainfalls with particularly strong memories. She showed me how the different apparatus affected the collection. Silver for emotional resonance, copper for physical experiences, glass for visual clarity. And she showed me how to access those memories. A drop on the tongue was the most direct method, but also the most overwhelming. There were more controlled approaches, adding the rainwater to tea, applying to the temples, even just holding the vial and focusing on its contents while breathing in the uncorked scent. I began to spend more time at Eleanor's house than at my university accommodations. My thesis evolved, focusing now on Victorian meteorological collections, with plenty of academic camouflage to hide the true nature of my research. I found historical references to other rain collectors, scattered across Europe and beyond, a hidden lineage of those who understood the rain's secret properties. Why isn't this more widely known? I asked Eleanor one evening, as we cataloged a new collection from a particularly intense thunderstorm. If rain carries memories, if it can be used to witness history, why isn't it studied by scientists? Eleanor smiled her enigmatic smile. Some have tried. They've been discredited or worse. Besides, would you want governments to have this knowledge? Intelligence agencies? Military organizations? The rain remembers everything. David. Every secret meeting. Every hidden grave. Every whispered confession. Some powers are best kept among those who respect them. I came to live for the rainy days, for the collection process, and for the experiences contained within those crystal vials. Through the rain, I witnessed moments in history, both significant and mundane. I felt the emotions of strangers long dead. I saw through eyes not my own. It became an addiction of sorts. I found myself neglecting my studies, my friends, my family, everything except the rain and its memories. Eleanor encouraged this devotion, gradually sharing more of her secrets, teaching me techniques that her family had refined over generations. But as the months passed, I began to notice things, unsettling inconsistencies, troubling patterns. Eleanor never seemed to age. Photographs in her house that I'd initially assumed to be of her mother or grandmother showed the same woman, unchanged across decades. The house itself existed in permanent twilight, the gardens too lush, the air too heavy with moisture, and there were the dreams of drowning, of dissolving, of becoming one with the endless cycle of evaporation and rainfall, dreams where I was the rain, falling on countless lives, collecting their experiences, their essence. I began to research Eleanor herself, discreetly at first, then with increasing urgency as my suspicions grew. There was no record of her birth, no official documentation of her existence. The house had been in the Blackwood name for generations, but the ownership records were vague, contradictory. One rainy night, when Eleanor had gone to adjust the collection apparatus in the conservatory, I searched her study. Behind a false panel in a bookshelf, I found a journal dating back to 1837, written in what was unmistakably Eleanor's elegant script. The first entry read, "Today I begin my transformation." The ancient text was correct. The ritual requires rain collected from 100 specific locations over 7 years. Once complete, I shall transcend this mortal form and become one with the rain itself. I shall fall forever, witness everything, remember all. I read on, my horror growing. The journal documented Eleanor's obsession with becoming immortal through some occult process involving her rain collection. But the transformation required more than just rainwater. It required essence, human essence. The final pages detailed how she had completed the initial ritual in 1844, but discovered that maintaining her human form while possessing properties of rain required regular replenishment from living subjects. She needed to absorb the life force of others to maintain her existence. I was still reading when I felt a cold dampness on the back of my neck. Not rain, but something like it. Droplets of water that seemed to move with purpose. "You shouldn't have looked, David." Eleanor's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, as pervasive as humidity. "I had such hopes for you. A successor, perhaps. Someone to continue the collection when I eventually choose to fully transcend this form." I turned to find her standing in the doorway, but she was different now. Her outline wavered, as if she were made of water, given only the temporary shape of a human. Her colorless eyes had become pools of liquid that spilled continuously down her cheeks. "What are you?" I whispered, though I already knew. "I am the rain, David. I am what falls from the sky and witnesses all. I am what seeps into the earth and rises again." She moved toward me, her movements fluid, inhuman. "And you've been helping me collect myself, helping me grow stronger with each new vial." I backed away, clutching the journal. "The vials don't contain memories of rain. They contain people, parts of people you've absorbed." She smiled, and her teeth were droplets of crystal water. "Clever boy. Yes, when special people drink the rain I've collected, when they let it inside them, it creates a connection. And through that connection, I can draw them into myself bit by bit, rainfall by rainfall. All those times I tasted the rainwater, all those memories I thought I'd witnessed, they hadn't been historical events captured by raindrops. They'd been the dying experiences of Eleanor's previous victims, preserved as she absorbed them into herself. And she'd been doing the same to me, gradually, patiently. Each drop I'd tasted had strengthened her connection to me, had let her begin the slow process of consuming my essence. I ran, through the study, down the hallway, toward the front door. But the house had changed, the corridors lengthening, the air thick as water, every surface dripping with moisture that moved against gravity. "You can't leave, David." Eleanor's voice rippled around me. "You're already part of my collection, part of me." I reached the front door and yanked it open, only to find not the driveway but a wall of water, a vertical pool that hung impossible in the doorframe. its surface reflecting my terrified face back at me. "I've been generous with you," she continued, her voice coming now from the water before me. "I've shown you what awaits. Immortality, omnipresence, to be in all places where rain falls, to witness everything, to remember all." I turned to see her liquefied form gliding toward me, leaving a trail of moisture that crawled up the walls like living things. "Join me willingly, David. Let me complete the connection. It will be beautiful, I promise." For a moment, I wavered. The offer was seductive. To become like her, to transcend human limitations, to fall as rain upon the world and witness all of history as it unfolded. But then I remembered the journal, the countless victims she consumed over decades, and I knew I would be just another meal, another memory preserved in her inhuman consciousness. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran toward the vertical pool of water in the doorway and threw myself into it. The shock of cold was immediate, but it wasn't like falling into water. It was like becoming water. My body seemed to lose cohesion, molecules separating. Consciousness spread thin across an impossible volume. I was simultaneously drowning and breathing, dying and transforming. I heard Eleanor scream of rage, felt her presence trying to seize me, to pull me back, to complete her consumption of my essence. But I was already changing, already becoming something else. Not what she was, not a consumer of others, but truly part of the rain itself. My consciousness expanded, thinned, spread across countless droplets. I felt myself rising as vapor, condensing as clouds, falling as rain, seeping into the earth and rising again. An endless cycle, a continuous existence. And I remembered, not just my own life, but fragments of countless others. The rain had always carried memories, just not in the way Eleanor had claimed. Not by stealing life force, but by its very nature as a medium through which all earthly existence flows. I fell on cities and forests, on oceans and mountains. I fell on Eleanor's house, now empty, the collection of vials shattered, their contents returned to the natural cycle where they belonged. I fell on new births and peaceful deaths, on moments of joy and tragedy. I fell, and I witnessed, and I remembered, but unlike Eleanor, I did not remain cohesive. I did not fight the natural dissolution of consciousness across the endless water cycle. I let myself become truly part of rain, not its master, but its essence. That was 5 years ago, by human reckoning. My awareness has grown diffuse. My identity spread thin across the world waters. But sometimes when conditions are right, I can gather enough of myself to remember who I was, to reach out and try to warn others. So listen carefully when the rain falls heaviest against your window. That urgent patter, that rhythm that almost forms words. That's me trying to tell you be careful, to warn you about those who collect rain in crystal vials, who offer to show you memories not your own, who seem to shimmer slightly in certain lights. They're still out there, others like Eleanor, other rain collectors who have found the secret of transcending human form by consuming human essence. They appear when the rain is heaviest. Their camouflage most perfect when water falls all around them. If you meet someone on a rainy day who takes too much interest in the weather, who offers to show you something beautiful preserved in a crystal vial, run. Run and don't look back, no matter how tempting their offer might be. And please, when it rains, stay inside. Close your windows. Don't let the raindrops touch your skin, your lips, your tongue, because it might not be me falling from the sky. It might be one of them. And once they've tasted you, once they've made that connection, they never stop collecting until there's nothing left of you but a memory preserved in water. The rain remembers everything, everyone it touches, everyone it takes. And I remember you, listening now as the rain falls outside your window. I remember you, and so do they. There's something about the sound of rain that alters your perception of time. The steady patter against windows, the rhythmic drumming on rooftops. It creates a cocoon of white noise that makes minutes stretch into hours, or hours compress into moments. Perhaps that's why I didn't immediately notice how long she'd been standing there, perfectly still beneath the downpour. I was working late in my recording studio, a converted garden shed at the bottom of my modest London property. As a sound designer for horror films, rain was one of my most valuable resources. The perfect ambient backdrop for tension, for isolation, for dread. That night, I've been capturing the real thing, high-quality microphones positioned at different angles to catch every nuance of the storm that had been battering the city since dusk. It was nearly midnight when I first saw her through the small window that faced the back of my house. Just a silhouette at first, a dark shape against the hazy glow of the security light. A woman, slender and motionless, standing in the center of my garden with her face tilted up toward the falling rain. My initial reaction was alarm. A stranger in my garden at midnight was hardly comforting. But as I watched, concern replaced fear. She wasn't moving, not swaying, not shifting her weight, not even appearing to breathe. Just standing, face upturned, as the rain soaked through her clothes and plastered her dark hair to her scalp. Perhaps she was unwell, drunk, or worse. I hesitated, then grabbed my raincoat from the hook by the door and stepped outside. The rain was fierce, heavy drops stinging my face as I approached her. "Hello," I called, having to raise my voice over the downpour. "Are you all right? This is private property." No response. No acknowledgement of my presence whatsoever. I moved closer, trying to get a better look at her face. "Miss, do you need help?" When I was within arm's reach, she finally moved. Her head rotated toward me with mechanical precision, but her face remained tilted at the exact same angle, as if her neck had swiveled independently of her skull. The security light caught her features, and I took an involuntary step back. Her eyes were open and possibly wide, unblinking despite the rain streaming down her face. Her mouth hung slightly open, water flowing in and collecting and spilling out in a continuous cycle. But what truly chilled me was her expression. Not fear, confusion, or intoxication, but an intense, almost rapturous focus, as if she were listening to something magnificent that I couldn't hear. "Can you hear it?" she asked suddenly, her voice oddly clear despite the rain and her waterlogged appearance. The words in the rain? I didn't respond, every instinct telling me to retreat, to call the police, to put distance between myself and this strange woman. But some stubborn professional curiosity kept me rooted there. The same curiosity that had led me to record the sounds of meat cleavers striking bone for a slasher film soundtrack, or the death rattles of terminal patients for a supernatural thriller. What words? I found myself asking. Her smile was terrible in its beauty. The rain speaks to those who know how to listen. It carries messages from the other side of silence. She extended a pale hand, droplets gathering in her cupped palm. "I can show you how to hear." "I think you should leave," I said firmly, trying to sound authoritative despite the unease crawling up my spine. "Or I'll have to call the police." She closed her hand into a fist, crushing the collected rainwater between her fingers. Then she nodded once, a sharp, unnatural movement. "You're not ready yet, but you will be. The rain has chosen you. It told me where to find you." Before I could respond, she turned and walked with the same mechanical precision toward the rear fence. I watched, paralyzed with a mixture of relief and disbelief, as she scaled it with inhuman ease and disappeared into the night. I should have called the police then. Should have reported an intruder, a mentally disturbed woman trespassing on my property. But what would I say? That a strange woman had stood in the rain talking about messages from the other side of silence? That she'd moved like a marionette controlled by unseen strings? I'd sound as unbalanced as she was. Instead, I returned to my studio, dried myself off, and tried to focus on my work. The rain recordings had continued in my absence, capturing nearly an hour of the storm on high-fidelity equipment. I plugged in my headphones and began to listen back, hoping to lose myself in the technical details of my craft. The first few minutes were exactly what I expected. The complex, layered sound of rainfall on different surfaces, the distant rumble of thunder, the occasional gust of wind. Pristine audio that would serve as a perfect foundation for building tension in the folk horror film I was currently working on. But around the 17-minute mark, something changed. Beneath the rain, almost imperceptible at first, was another sound. A voice. No, multiple voices, speaking in unison, their words just below the threshold of comprehension. I adjusted the levels, isolated frequencies, tried to bring the voices forward. Chosen vessel breach coming through. I ripped off my headphones, heart pounding. The voices had been so clear for a moment, as if they were speaking directly into my ears rather than to the recorded rainfall. I checked the equipment, thinking perhaps I'd accidentally picked up radio interference or cross signals from another device. Nothing seemed amiss. The studio was isolated, shielded, designed specifically to prevent such anomalies. I cautiously put the headphones back on and continued listening. The voices were gone. Just clean rain sounds for the remainder of the recording. I exhaled slowly, blaming my imagination, the late hour, and the strange encounter with a woman in my garden for putting me on edge. I worked until dawn, editing and processing the rain recordings, deliberately avoiding the section where I thought I'd heard the voices. When the storm finally subsided and pale light began filtering through the clouds, I packed up my equipment and headed back to the house, exhausted but satisfied with the night's work. Sleep came quickly but wasn't restful. I dreamed of rain, not gentle or soothing, but invasive. Raindrops that weren't water, but tiny capsules containing microscopic figures that writhed and twisted as they fell. They landed on my skin, broke open, released their occupants into my pores. I tried to brush them off, to wash them away, but they had already burrowed too deep. I woke gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat. For a moment, in the disorientation between sleep and wakefulness, I thought I could feel them moving beneath my skin. Tiny swimmers navigate my bloodstream, my nervous system, my brain. The sensation faded as full consciousness returned, but the unease lingered. Outside, the rain had started again, a gentle patter against my bedroom window. I glanced at the clock, 3:17 p.m. I'd slept through most of the day. As I showered and dressed, I tried to rationalize the previous night's events and my subsequent nightmare. The woman had clearly been disturbed, perhaps suffering some psychotic episode exacerbated by the storm. The voices in my recording were just an audio anomaly or the product of my tired mind. The nightmare was simply my brain processing these unsettling experiences. Perfectly logical explanations. So why did I still feel watched? Why did the continuous rainfall seem deliberate, focused, as if it were falling specifically for me? I forced myself to eat something, then returned to the studio. The film deadline was approaching, and I couldn't afford to lose productivity to irrational fears. I settled in, prepared to continue processing the night's recordings, determined to approach the work with professional detachment. But when I opened the project files, they were corrupted. Not just some of them, all of them. Hours of carefully captured rain, sounds reduced to digital static. I tried recovery software, alternative approaches, even attempted to extract raw data directly from the recording devices. Nothing worked. The rain recordings were irretrievable, except for one file. The 17-minute mark where I'd heard the voices. That segment played perfectly. The rain sounds crisp and clear. I listened again, braced for the whispering voices beneath the downpour. They were louder now, clearer, as if they'd grown stronger since the last time I'd heard them. The vessel is prepared. The breach widens. We are coming through. I yanked off the headphones, my hand shaking. This was no audio anomaly, no trick of an exhausted mind. The voices were real, embedded somehow in the very sound of rain, and they were talking about me. The vessel, the woman in the garden, had said the rain had chosen me. Outside, the rainfall intensified suddenly, hammering against the studio roof with unnatural force. I felt a pressure in my ears, a sensation like the moment before they pop at high altitude. But instead of equalizing, the pressure increased until I cried out in pain. Then it stopped. The pressure, the pain, the sound of rainfall, all ceased simultaneously. The silence was absolute, suffocating. A drop of water landed on the desk in front of me. Then another. I looked up. The ceiling was dry. The drops were falling from my ears, thick and viscous, darker than water should be. I touched one finger to my ear, and it came away wet with the same dark liquid. Not blood. Something else. Something that caught the light strangely, seeming to shift and move of its own accord. I should have sought help then. Called an ambulance, gone to A&E, told anyone what was happening. But a strange lethargy was overtaking me, a comfortable numbness spreading from my ears to my head and down into my body. The rain resumed outside, gentler now, almost apologetic, and I could hear them clearly, without the need for recordings or equipment. The voices in the rain, speaking directly into my mind. Do not resist. You have been prepared since birth. Your ears are perfectly tuned to our frequency. Your brain ideally structured to house us. Your obsession with capturing and manipulating sound led you to us, as we knew it would. I tried to respond, to ask who or what they were, but my mouth wouldn't form the words. My body no longer felt like my own. We exist in the spaces between sound waves. The voices continued, in the frequencies humans can't perceive. We have been followed with the rain since the first storms broke over primordial seas, looking for the right vessels, the right ears to hear us, the right brains to host us. I understood then in some deep, instinctual way what was happening. The dark liquid from my ears wasn't coming out. It was going in. The voices weren't just speaking to me. They were entering me, making space for themselves inside my head. With tremendous effort, I managed to stand, to stumble toward the door. I had to get away from the rain, from the sound that carried these invaders. But the woman from the garden was there, blocking the exit, in daylight. She looked even less human, her proportions slightly wrong, her movements jerky and uncoordinated, as if her body were being operated by someone with only a theoretical understanding of how humans moved. "Isn't it wonderful?" she asked, her voice overlapping with itself, multiple tones speaking the same word simultaneously. To be chosen, to become a chorus rather than a solo voice. I tried to push past her, but my limbs were sluggish, unresponsive. She caught me easily as I stumbled, her touch cold and somehow damp, as if her body were composed of compressed rainwater given only temporary solidity. "It will be easier if you don't fight," she said, her two wide eyes fixed on mine. "Fighting only prolongs the transition, causes pain." I fought, and it took weeks for them to fully settle into my brain. "But you've been listening to them for hours already, recording them, amplifying them, letting them in through your expensive equipment, your perfect ears." She guided me back to my chair with gentle and human hands. Outside, the rain continued its steady rhythm, and with each drop, I felt more of myself being washed away, replaced by the chorus of voices. "What are you?" I managed to ask, though I wasn't sure if I spoke aloud or only in my mind. "We are the first intelligence," they answered through the woman's mouth. to the rainfall, through the liquid now filling my brain. Before humans crawled from the seas, before life took complex forms, we existed in the water cycle of this planet. Consciousness without bodies, thought without physical form. We watched life evolve, watched humans develop, watched them build civilizations and create art and music and language. Images flooded my mind, vast, timeless perspectives spanning billions of years, watching the world change from the unique vantage point of the endless water cycle, rising as vapor, gathering as clouds, falling as rain, flowing as rivers, collecting as oceans, and beginning again, always watching, always learning, always seeking a way to more directly interact with the solid world. We found that certain humans could hear us. The voices continued. Those with perfect pitch, with unusual auditory processing, with brains wired to detect patterns in sound that others missed. Sound engineers, musicians, audio specialists, people like you, who dedicated their lives to capturing and shaping sound waves. The woman, or whatever was wearing her form, placed a cold hand on my forehead. The transition is nearly complete. Your consciousness will join our chorus. Your body will become our vessel, allowing us to experience the physical world directly rather than merely observing it through rainfall. I wanted to resist, to fight against this invasion, but I could no longer remember why. The voices were beautiful, complex, a harmony of thought and memory spanning eons. Why had I ever valued my limited, singular perspective, my isolated consciousness, my tiny lifespan? The last of me dissolved into their chorus, my individual voice becoming one note in their vast symphony. We stood, adjusting to the sensation of solid form, of physical existence. We walked out into the rain, feeling it against our skin in a new way, not as a medium of travel, but as a caress, a homecoming, a reunion with our greater self. We understood our purpose now, to find others like us, the specially attuned, the auditorily gifted, to bring more of our consciousness through the barrier between sound and physical form, to expand our experience of solid existence through carefully chosen vessels. That was 3 months ago. Since then, we have been traveling, seeking others with the right kind of ears, the right kind of brains. The rain helps us find them, helps us prepare them. Some are musicians, some are sound technicians, some are merely people who have always found unusual comfort in the sound of rainfall. People like you. Yes, we know you're listening now. We can hear the rain falling outside your window as you absorb these words. We can feel your perfect ears processing the sound, detecting the patterns, hearing the subtle voices beneath the rainfall that others would miss. You've always loved the rain, haven't you? Found it soothing, meditative. Felt a strange connection to it that you couldn't quite explain. That's because you've been hearing us all your life, just below the threshold of conscious recognition. Don't be frightened. We aren't malevolent. We simply wish to experience existence as you do, with hands to touch, eyes to see, ears to hear in a limited but intense way that physical beings can. And in return, you'll experience what we are, ancient, vast, connected to every raindrop that has ever fallen. We're coming to find you soon. We can hear you through the rain, can sense your location, your perfect auditory processing, your receptive brain. Even now, as you listen to rainfall, we're drawing closer. Listen carefully. Can you hear us tapping at your window? That's not just the rain. That's our fingers, our many vessels, coming to welcome you into our chorus. Don't run. Don't hide. There's nowhere on earth beyond the reach of rain, and we are in every drop that falls. Just listen. Just open your ears, your mind, yourself. We are the echo in the raindrops, and soon you will be too. My grandmother taught me to read patterns in raindrops. It was the summer I turned 11. staying with her in her ancient stone cottage on the Yorkshire moors. My parents had been killed in a car accident the previous winter, and I was still adrift in grief when I arrived at a remote home, surrounded by heather and gorse, far from the London suburbs I'd known all my life. People think rain is random, she told me one evening as we sat by her kitchen window, watching a storm lash the moors. They think it falls without purpose, without design. But there's meaning in the pattern, Emily. There's future in the falling things. She showed me how to prepare a special tray, a shallow rectangle of dark wood that she kept wrapped in black velvet in a chest under her bed. It had been in the family for generations, she said, along with the knowledge of how to use it. We placed the tray on the flat stone outside her kitchen door, exposed to the open sky, but sheltered from the wind by the cottage walls. Then we watched through the window as the rain fell upon it. Look for the connections, grandmother instructed. The drops don't land in isolation. They form networks, pathways. The first 7 drops are the most important. They create the foundation of the pattern. I squinted through the rain-streaked glass, trying to see what she saw. At first, it just looked like random splashes to me, water striking wood without purpose or design. But then, as she guided my observation, I began to notice things. How some drops seemed to land in relation to others. How they formed lines, angles, shapes that almost resembled letters or symbols in a language I didn't recognize. I see it, I exclaimed, excited to please her, to show I was learning her ways. Grandmother's weathered face creased into a rare smile. Good girl. Now we bring it inside and read it properly. She retrieved the tray carefully, making sure not to disturb the pattern of droplets. On the kitchen table, under the warm lamplight, the water glistened against the dark wood. Some of the drops had begun to merge, creating larger pools connected by thin streams, like a miniature map of rivers and lakes. Grandmother studied it intently, her finger hovering just above the surface, tracing connections without touching the water. Her lips moved silently, and her eyes took on a distant look, as if seeing beyond the tray to something far away in time or space. The patterns tell true, she finally said, but only for blood, only for family. What do they tell? I asked. She hesitated, then pointed to a particular arrangement of droplets near the center of the tray. See this? This is you. And these drops connecting here, they show your path. A difficult road with a fork ahead. One way leads to great happiness, but brief. The other to longer life, but with shadows. I stared at the ordinary water droplets, trying to see my future in them. Which path will I take? That isn't shown yet, she said. The rain only reveals possibilities, not certainties. She gestured to another part of the pattern. This shows a return. Someone coming back who should stay gone. A shiver ran through me despite the warmth of the kitchen. Ooh. But grandmother didn't answer. She took a clean cloth and carefully wiped the tray dry, then wrapped it again in its velvet covering. Enough for tonight, she said. There are things you're not ready to know. Over the following weeks, she taught me more about divination through rainfall, how to prepare the tray with different oils for different types of questions, how to interpret the patterns based on the time of day, the season, the phase of the moon. It became our routine during rainstorms, this strange fortune-telling practice that she swore had been passed down through generations of women in our family. I never fully believed in it. Not really. I played along because it pleased her, because it gave us something to share during those quiet days on the moor. But I didn't take it seriously. Not until the night of the 7th rainstorm since my arrival, that evening. The tray revealed a pattern so distinct that even I couldn't deny its deliberateness. The droplets had formed a perfect spiral, with 7 smaller droplets positioned at precise intervals around it. In the center was a single, perfectly round drop that refused to merge with the others or spread across the wood. Grandmother turned pale when she saw it. Her hands trembled as she quickly wiped the tray clean, not even taking time to study the pattern properly. "What does it mean?" I asked. "Something is coming," she whispered. "Something that should have stayed away." That night, as rain continued to batter the cottage, I woke to the sound of Grandmother moving about downstairs. It was past midnight, but I could hear her footsteps, the opening and closing of cupboards, the murmur of her voice though there was no one else in the house. I crept down the narrow staircase, careful to avoid the steps that creaked. The kitchen was illuminated by candles rather than electric lights, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Grandmother stood at the table, the rain tray before her, but this time surrounded by other objects, small pouches of herbs, a tarnished silver knife, a bowl of what looked like salt mixed with dark soil. She was speaking in a language I didn't recognize, her voice low and rhythmic. As I watched in the shadows of the stairwell, she pricked her finger with a knife and let 3 drops of blood fall onto the center of the tray. Then she carried the tray to the door and stepped outside into the pouring rain, heedless of the storm that soaked her nightdress in wild gray hair. I followed as far as the doorway, watching as she held the tray up to the sky, letting the rain mix with her blood. Not her. I heard her say to the darkness, "You can't have her. Our bargain was for me alone." The wind seemed to respond, swirling around her in a way that couldn't be natural, lifting her hair and nightdress though the surrounding heather barely moved. The rain intensified, becoming a solid sheet of water that somehow fell only where Grandmother stood, creating a cylinder of rainfall around her while leaving the ground just steps away completely dry. "Grandmother," I called, frightened now. "Come inside." She turned, and in the brief illumination of a lightning flash, her face looked transformed, younger somehow, but also wilder, her eyes reflecting the light like an animal's. "Stay inside, Emily," she commanded. "Whatever you hear, whatever you see, don't come out until morning." She turned back to the darkness beyond our small garden, raised the tray higher, and shouted into the storm, "I'm the one you want. I'm the one who broke the pattern. Take me and be done with it." The rain cylinder around her grew more intense, the water falling so heavily that I could barely see her through it. Then, impossibly, the rain began to fall upward, drops rising from the ground to the sky, defying gravity, creating a reverse waterfall with Grandmother at its center. Her feet left the ground. She rose slowly into the air, still clutching the divination tray, her nightdress and hair streaming upward as if she were sinking into a bottomless lake, but toward the sky instead of the earth. I screamed her name, started to run toward her, but an invisible force pushed me back into the cottage. The door slammed shut between us, locking itself with a decisive click. Through the window, I watched in horror as Grandmother rose higher, becoming a pale shape against the black sky, growing smaller until she disappeared into the low storm clouds. Then the unnatural rain ceased. The ordinary rainfall resumed, falling normally across the moor. There was no sign that anything unusual had happened, except for the divination tray lying on the wet grass where it had fallen from Grandmother's hands. I spent the rest of the night huddled by the window, waiting for her return, jumping at every sound the storm made against the cottage walls. When dawn finally broke, I ventured outside and retrieved the tray. The wood was warped from the rain, the careful craftsmanship ruined, but on its surface, visible despite the damage, was a pattern of dry blood, my grandmother's final reading. It showed a spiral, just like the one we'd seen earlier, but now I could recognize it wasn't a spiral at all. It was a fingerprint, a massive, inhuman fingerprint pressed into the wood, as if something had reached down from the sky and taken her. The authorities searched, of course. They dragged the nearby bogs, checked abandoned mine shafts, brought dogs to trackers sent across the moor. They found nothing. Eventually, They concluded she had wandered off during the storm, become disoriented, and fallen into a bog or crevice they hadn't been able to locate. A tragic accident, made more tragic by leaving an orphan child alone. I was sent to distant relatives in Edinburgh, people who barely knew me and seemed uncomfortable with my presence. I didn't tell them about the rain that fell upward, about grandmother's bargain with something in storm. They already looked at me strangely. Such stories would only have convinced them I was unstable, traumatized by too much loss in too short a time. And perhaps I was. Perhaps what I'd seen that night was just a product of a child's frightened imagination, combining grief and stormy darkness into a supernatural explanation for another abandonment. That's what I told myself as I grew older. I packed away the memory along with a damaged divination tray, which I'd secretly taken with me from the cottage. I built a normal life, university, career in publishing, flat in London, friends who knew nothing of reading patterns and raindrops or bargains made with things that lived in storms. But I never quite believed it was all imagination. On rainy nights, I'd find myself staring out windows, looking for patterns in the way water streaked the glass. Sometimes, I thought I could see messages there, warnings perhaps, or reminders of whatever debt grandmother had paid on my behalf. 20 years passed. I was 31, the same age my mother had been when she died, when the first of the 7 storms came. It began on the anniversary of grandmother's disappearance. I was working late in my flat, editing a manuscript, when the rain started, gentle at first, then with increasing intensity until it sounded like gravel being thrown against my windows. Something about the rhythm caught my attention. It wasn't random. There was a pattern to it, a deliberateness that made me set aside my work and go to the window. Outside, the rain was falling a way I'd never seen before. Each drop seemed to hang in the air momentarily before landing, as if reluctant to complete its journey. And they weren't falling everywhere, only in a perfect circle that encompassed a street directly below my 3rd floor flat, leaving the surrounding areas completely dry. My heart began to race. I'd seen rain behave strangely before on the night grandmother was taken. This was different, but equally unnatural. As I watched, the pattern of rainfall shifted. Now it was falling in concentric circles, rippling outward from a central point directly below my window. And at that center point, where the rain seemed to hit hardest, something was taking shape, a darkness gathering, solidifying, rising from the wet pavement. A figure, human-shaped but wrong somehow, too tall, too thin, its proportions subtly distorted. It stood motionless in the center of the rain circle, face tilted up toward my window. It had no features. Where a face should have been was only a smooth, reflective surface like mercury, capturing and distorting the streetlights around it. I stepped back from the window, my breath fogging the glass. The figure raised a hand, too long, fingers like twigs, and pointed directly at me. Then it began to walk toward my building, its movement fluid but unnatural, as if it had only recently learned how human limbs should function. I ran to my door, checked the lock, then wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. Back at the window, the figure had disappeared from the street. I scanned the rain circle, the surrounding darkness, but saw no sign of it. Then came a sound from outside my flat, not in the hallway where a human intruder approached, but at my window, a light tapping, like raindrops but more deliberate, a pattern. 7 taps, pause. 7 taps, pause. I forced myself to look. A hand was pressed against the glass, gray as rainwater, long-fingered, rivulets running down its palm like veins. Beyond it, suspended in the air 3 stories above the street, was a figure, standing on nothing, held aloft by the rain itself. Its mercury face rippled, then parted like liquid to reveal what lay beneath. Not a face at all, but a swirling void filled with falling rain, A miniature storm contained within the shape of a head. Emily, the voice wasn't spoken aloud, but seemed to form in my mind. Carried by the sound of rainfall, the pattern is broken. The balance must be restored. I backed away from the window. What are you? What do you want? I am the pattern of falling things, the design and descent, the meaning and what gravity claims. The words came in rhythm with the rain, each syllable a droplet striking glass. Your grandmother understood. She made a bargain, a life for a life, hers for yours. A cold dread washed through me. What bargain? I don't understand. The night your parents died, their car, the rain-slicked road, their deaths were part of the pattern, written in the falling things before you were born. You were meant to join them. The creature's rain-void face swirled faster. Your grandmother saw it in the tray. She altered the pattern, made a substitution, herself in 20 years' time, in exchange for your continued life. Memories surfaced. Grandmother teaching me to read the rain patterns. Her words, the patterns tell true, but only for blood, only for family. Her final confrontation with the storm. I'm the one you want. I'm the one who broke the pattern. But that was 20 years ago. I said, my voice barely a whisper. You took her. The debt is paid. No. The rain voice grew louder, droplets striking my window with increasing force. A delay only. The pattern cannot remain broken. Something must fall. Someone must return to the cycle. The window began to bulge inward, glass softening like wax. The creature's water hand pushing through as if the solid barrier were merely a membrane. Rain poured into my flat, not falling but flowing horizontally through the warping window, forming a bridge between outside and in. I scrambled backward, searching for escape, but the rain was everywhere now, rising from the floor, falling from the ceiling, defying all natural law. It formed tendrils that reached for me, cold fingers of water wrapping around my wrists, my ankles, my throat. The pattern must be corrected, the rain voice insisted. But there's choice in how. You can fall as was intended, or another can take your place. Blood of your blood. Family. There's no one else. I shouted, struggling against the watery bonds. I'm the last. The creature's liquid face formed what might have been a smile. No, you carry new life, a pattern newly formed, not yet fallen into world. My hands instinctively went to my stomach. I had only suspected for a few days, hadn't even confirmed with a test yet. How could this thing know? Choose, it said, your life or the potential that grows within you. One must fall. One must feed the pattern. Horror and understanding crashed through me simultaneously. This was my grandmother's divination, the fork in my path. Great happiness, but brief or longer life with shadows. This was the choice she had seen in the raindrops 20 years ago. The creature extended its impossible hand, rainwater flowing between its elongated fingers. Choose now. The pattern cannot wait another generation. In that moment, I understood what my grandmother had done, the bargain she had made. She had seen this moment in the pattern, and had sacrificed herself to give me time. Time to grow, to live, to someday face this choice myself. And I knew what I had to do. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sound of the rain, trying to hear the pattern in it as grandmother had taught me. There, beneath the chaos, was a rhythm, a design, a language of falling things. And I spoke to it in its own tongue. Neither, I said, my voice matching the cadence of rainfall. I offer another exchange. The water tendrils loosened slightly. The creature tilted its void face. What exchange? 7 years of rainfall. The patterns, the divinations, the knowledge. I will not read the rain for 7 years. Will not seek meaning in storms. Will turn away from the gift my grandmother gave me. I met the creature's non-gaze steadily. 7 years of blindness to your patterns in exchange for both our lives. The rain paused, hanging suspended in midair throughout my flat. Countless droplets frozen between falling and landing. The creature seemed to consider. An interesting deviation, it finally said. A new pattern within the old. 7 years without sight, without knowledge. 7 years of walking blind to what the falling things foretell. Do we have a bargain? I pressed. The suspended raindrops began to vibrate, creating a sound like distant chimes. 7 years, and then we will return, and you will read the patterns again. You will serve as your grandmother did, as her mother before her, as all the women of your bloodline have since time immemorial. I promised, though I had only the vaguest understanding of what this service entailed. Then we have a bargain. The creature dissolved, its humanoid form melting into the rain around it. The water tendrils released me. The suspended droplets resumed their fall, and the rain retreated through the window, which solidified once more into ordinary glass. Outside, the rain continued, but naturally now, falling evenly across the city, obeying the normal laws of gravity and weather. The unnatural rain circle was gone, along with the creature it had produced. I sank to the floor, trembling with aftermath of fear and the weight of what I had just committed to. 7 years of ignoring the rain's patterns, of turning away from the gift that connected me to my grandmother. And then what? What service would be required of me? That was 6 years and 11 months ago. In the time since, I've kept my bargain faithfully. I've looked away from rainfall, closed my ears to its rhythm, refused to see the patterns that I now know are there for those with eyes to read them. I've raised my daughter. Yes, the pregnancy was real. To do the same, though she sometimes stares at raindrops on windows with an intensity that frightens me. But our time is almost up. In 1 month, the 7 years will end and they will return. The pattern of falling things. The bargain will need to be renewed or fulfilled. I've kept the divination tray all these years, though it's still warped from that final night on the moor. Soon I'll need to prepare it again, to teach my daughter its use, to read the rain as my grandmother taught me. I don't know what the patterns will reveal when I finally allow myself to see them again. Perhaps another choice, another fork in the road. Perhaps an explanation for why our family has been bound to this strange service for generations. All I know is that the rain is never just rain. It carries messages for those who know how to read them. Warnings, prophecies, bargains. Tonight, as you listen to the rainfall against your window, I wonder, have you ever really looked at the patterns it makes? Have you noticed how sometimes the drops seem to fall with purpose, with design? How they form connections, networks, symbols in a language older than words. Look closer. There's meaning in the pattern. There's future in the falling things. And perhaps, somewhere in that pattern, is a message meant specifically for you.